How you guys doing today? It's Anthony Gangi. Welcome to another episode of Tier Talk. Guys, we have a great discussion coming your way. We're going to talk about signs that you're becoming too close to an inmate. 18 signs to be to 18 signs to be more specific. 18 examples to be more specific. Guys, my guest today is going to be Russ Hamilton. We all know Russ, founders of Keepers of Chaos. But before we introduce him, I just want to bring up our sponsors. Our first sponsor is American. Oh, that's a small logo. I hate when I do that. I don't know why I do that. Big logo, American Military University. If you guys are looking for a degree, seek higher education, please check out American Military University. It's a great online school, very supportive of what we do in corrections, very supportive of what we do here on Tier Talk. And we also have Guardian RFID, from inmate tracking and cell checks to cloud-based business and artificial intelligence. Guardian RFID transforms jails, prisons, and juvenile detention facilities of every size. Visit guardianrfid.com for more information. If you guys get a chance, check out the YouTube channel, because we also put content up on there as well. And we also have Inmate Manipulation Decoded. That's now available. It's on Amazon. Link to that is in the description. That's a good book that will also relate to the dialogue. And we also have Lessons learned while working in a prison, my journey from officer to administration. That's now available. Link to that is in description. And there's Russ with the book. Russ, what's your thoughts on that book?
No, it's an awesome book. You know, the really truly great thing about this book, even though it's very comprehensive, it's incomplete. And by incomplete, I mean every part of it has a way for the person who has it to add their experience, their knowledge, their insight, their training directly into it. And so, no matter who you are, you can add to the body of knowledge, to the epistemology of corrections, as it were, just by, finishing this book out to the best of your ability. So anyway, it's great. That's the greatest thing about it, is that even though it's very full of information, it's not complete. You have to complete it.
Thanks, Russ. And guys, this is what Russ said. It's about taking your correctional career up a notch. And sales are doing good. I'm happy for it. We're getting it out into the right hands, and hopefully this could be something that's used for training. And again, the link to that is in the description. So, Russ, do you mind introducing yourself to our audience, please?
Not at all. My name is Russ Hamilton. I am a former and retired sergeant from California Department of Corrections and Rehabilitation. I'm also a former senior correctional officer from a juvenile facility. I currently work for a private company, and we do reentry and rehabilitation work for a local probation department and a local jail, where I'm a case manager.
Yes, Russ is now on the other side of corrections. And Russ, how's Keepers of Chaos going?
Keepers of Chaos is awesome. We're growing by leaps and bounds. We're very much engaged in the process of helping people with regards to their profession. I just had my old partner called me up the other night, and he had someone very close to him, part of his extended family, as it were, that's looking to get into corrections. And we went ahead and welcomed her on board to Keepers of Chaos. And, she was just looking for a little bit of that inside baseball. What can I do to be the best? What can I do to make sure I get the job? And she's in the process right now. And so we're doing what we always do at Keepers of Chaos. We're helping people achieve their goal, achieve their dream, achieve success at being a corrections professional.
Yeah, and guys, Keepers of Chaos, I mean, the people that are part of that group, they mentor others. I mean, it's just great to see that interaction, people with experience sharing those experiences with people that have yet to go through that. So, again, big fan of Keepers of Chaos. Now, this show is going to be quick. We got 18 tips. It sounds like a lot, but we're going to speed through them. But let me show you two shorts. Now, I did two videos. These are shorts. They're 1-minute shorts. You could find these on the my YouTube channel. And they're just going to quickly go over the 18 tips. What they basically do is they're just going to say them. And then today, we're going to announce each tip, each sign that you're getting a little too close, and basically just share a story or two about each one. So today will be the longer version. But first, let's get to those shorts. So stand by. I'm going to share it. Guys, here's some quick signs that say you're overly involved with an inmate. First one, probably most important, is you're oversharing your personal information. I don't care how small or trivial it may be. Try not to share personal information. You find yourself defending the inmate's negative behavior. You feel guilty if you have to write the inmate up. You go out of your way to see the inmate when you're at work. You think about the inmate when you're home. You have accepted an offer of protection from the inmate. Hands in pocket when interacting with the inmate. Complacency. You give the inmate information they shouldn't have, like maybe when there's going to be a shakedown. You have justified in your head that this inmate is different. You allow the inmate to call you by your first name. You talk shit about your coworkers to them. Video number 2 that says you're too close to an inmate. Number 1, you feel obligated to them. They have done for you, and now you feel you have to do for them. You somehow feel responsible for their negative behavior. You trust them more than your peers or coworkers. Look for their approval to do your job, to push the directives that you're meant and expected to carry out. Rationalize your connection to this inmate by saying you're just building a rapport. Accept compliments from them willingly, especially compliments that are personal in nature, like "you look good today, CO." 1. No becomes hard to say to them. Now, I'm going to say that twice. No becomes hard to say to them. All right, so guys, I just rambled off those tips, put them in 2 separate shorts. So again, they're about a minute each. But I thought what we could do today is break down each one. And this way we have a little bit of a longer discussion. So again, for people that want some clarity, this video will provide clarity to those tips. And again, some of these tips may relate to each other, or some of these signs may relate to each other. But having said that, I think when me and Russ say our stories, we'll be able to, if need be, connect some of those. But the first one, which to me is the most important one, is oversharing your personal information. Russ, what is your thoughts when it comes to sharing personal information with inmates? I know you have those 3 famous words there. Knowledge is
Power. All right. So anytime that you're giving up knowledge to someone else, they, in a way, have a leverage and a power. Sometimes it's a leverage and a power over you specifically. And that's certainly the case with the way things work in corrections. You know, these guys that are able to establish and develop a deeper relationship with you based on that knowledge, it makes you more vulnerable to manipulation. That doesn't mean that you're going to become corrupt, but what it can mean is that you're put in a position where you can't do your job as effectively, or that you maybe present some sort of a threat to the safety and security. You're going to let a guy go on, you know, some charge that you should have written. Maybe you're not going to search him quite as well. But then there's the other side of the coin where we look at things that are, you know, a clear and present and immediate type of danger. People that can get information on you can also find out where you live. They can find out who your loved ones are. They can extort you. They can blackmail you. It could even go so far as to, you know, you ending up dead or a loved one ending up dead. Just look at what happened, you know, in what happened in Alabama with that correctional officer. You know, she was the only casualty, except for all the rest of her department that was also a casualty, because now they look like shit.
Yeah, and guys, I want to mention something, guys. Oversharing your personal information, I mean, that's the foundation for the boundaries that we set between ourselves and the inmate population. If I can't trust you to protect your own personal information, which is the things that should be most important to you, how can I trust you to protect the integrity of operations for the facility? I mean, if that makes any sense, because the boundaries of personal information, that's the line. And at any time when you have a manipulative inmate, they're going to look to pass that line. They're going to look to cross that boundary. And having said that, the more personal information they have about you, it gives them the opportunity to build a different level of connection that's not based on professionalism. It's based on, our relationship with each other. At this point here, when you're sharing personal information, you are developing a relationship. Whether that's going to be we're connected on because we're fathers or we're parents or we're sport fans or whatever the case may be. Just remember, guys, the first thing when it comes to building that professional relationship with that inmate is to make sure you are the one that's in control. You're not the one answering questions. You're the one that's asking them. We talked about in another video a while back about the dangers of small talk. Definitely something you guys want to watch, because small talk could just be information gathering, and you could just giving out information without any care in the world of how that information is going to be used. Again, Russ's 3 words at the very beginning is so important. Knowledge is power. At the end of the day, who left that dialogue with more knowledge? I mean, you got to know exactly what each dialogue is going to be headed because you're the one driving the vehicle. But again, guys, those boundaries, if I expect you to protect the integrity of the facility, integrity of operations, I also better be seeing you protect your personal information, because if you don't protect your personal information, I highly doubt you're going to be able to protect certain information that we need. Because to me, the personal information, that carries the most weight. I mean, would you agree with that real quick, Russ? Would you agree that if you saw an officer or a staff member not protecting their personal information, that it's kind of questionable if they're going to wind up protecting other things that relate to the integrity of the facility when they're building this closeness with the inmate?
That just harkens back to, complacency. If you are feeling comfortable with just, leaving your personal information on a piece of paper on a desk, or with spouting off and talking about where you've been the weekend, or about your neighborhood, about the names of your wife and your kids, then you maybe don't have a real good understanding of just the environment that you're actually in and how dangerous, pernicious, and, just outright what it can be in the way of a threat to you. So, don't take those things for granted. Guard those things jealously, and don't talk about stuff around inmates because they're always ear hustling, always.
Yes. Now, guys, the signs that we're going to give you, or tips, whatever it is, it's not in any particular order. We're just going to run down the list. Some may connect. So there may be some that we may go through a little bit quicker than others because they connect to maybe something we've already discussed. But the next thing, and again, I'll have Russ introduce each thought, is you defend the inmate's negative behavior. Russ, I know we've seen this, Russ. So what's your thoughts on this?
Okay, so there's 2 ways that this can come about. You're defending the inmate's negative behavior in your own head. Well, he's justified in the way he's acting towards staff because, the staff are, trying to get him. They're out to get him. They're not as enlightened as you are about the way things, should work inside a prison, inside of a jail. And the other part is where you're maybe actually, coming to their bail, not based on justice, not based on the truth, not based on facts that are within the penumbra of the incident, but rather you're coming to his defense because you've gone from being cordial to being friendly to being friends. And that's not good because you're losing your objectivity. When you lose your objectivity, you're on the verge of what? Being manipulated. And it's as simple as that. So you should be as objective as possible. And if there's any time where you're defending an inmate's negative behavior, you really need to check yourself. You need to, do the gut check and say, hey, you know what? I've been compromised. That doesn't mean that you've been co-opted or put into the service of evil. But what it means is that you're now in a position where you can't be objective, you can't be unbiased, and you're looking to do things for inmates that are outside the bounds of your profession.
Hey, Russ, you said some really good points there, because I noticed something that you said that was unique with me. You said something of external and something of internal, and that kind of crosses into the next tip. But let me go first. When you defend the inmate's negative behavior, the defense is more of has an external orientation. And what I mean by that is, this inmate's about ready to get written up, and you may go up to another officer, another staff member, say, hey, listen, if you write this person up, they've been doing good so far, and this is only going to set them back. I mean, sometimes you could see program providers that may do that, where what they'll do is the inmate could be doing well in a program, do something foolish, and then the officer goes to write them up, and a program provider or even management may come up and say, hey, listen, this inmate's doing well. Let's go ahead and forgive that charge. And it's like, yeah, but part of rehabilitation is accountability. So I don't think we're in a good position to defend this inmate's negative behavior, because at the end of the day, obviously he's not doing well, because this inmate still failed to do whatever it was that I'm trying to hold them accountable for. And now you are giving this inmate the benefit of the doubt. So that's more of the external side. But the other thing is, and it crosses into now more of an internal, and maybe I'll start with this one, Russ, is when you feel guilty if you have to write the inmate a charge. I mean, I've seen it where staff will write up an inmate a charge, and then the inmate may come up and say, well, if you write me today, I'm not going to be able to see my family, So it's like, well, you're holding me guilty now for the actions that you committed. Well, you committed the fault to the inmate. You committed the fault, so therefore you're responsible, not me, for the sanctions that you are now going to receive. I've seen people sit back and say, well, if I do write them, man, then they're not going to get the visits. And it's like, okay, but that's not your fault. That's their fault. Don't let the inmate shift that guilt. You are not responsible for their negative behavior. You're responsible for holding them accountable for their negative behavior. But again, I love when Russ said the external and then the internal, because I think that's what leans into that feeling of guilt. You may feel guilty for writing an inmate a charge because the inmate may play some game in regards to why they did it in their justification, or what the sanction can do if you commit to the charge. Either way, at the end of the day, it's not your fault that they committed that action. That's on them. So don't let the feelings of guilt overwhelm you to the point you're not willing to do your job, which is to hold that inmate accountable. And they will play that guilt card. But what's your thoughts on that, Russ?
So it's like that now, huh? I mean, that's the typical response, is say, no, it's not like that now. It's been like this. It's always been like this. And if you've moved off of that to the point where suddenly it is like that now, and you're trying to regain that ground, it's difficult. But for the inmate to use that, there has to be an element of truth in it. Usually the easiest thing to tell them is just, no, it's always been that way. I don't know what your perception of what's going on here is, but I know that my perception is that I'm here to keep you accountable.
Yeah, and remember, guys, I like that. Your job is to help the inmate help themselves. Remember that. That's even in my manipulation book, my manipulation course. Your job is to help the inmate help themselves. And also remember, your help is not prescribed through the wants of the inmate, but rather the needs of the agency. So never eliminate that middle road. Like, oh, I got to do what's best for the inmate. No, you got to do what's best for the agency so you could do what's best for the inmate. So again, it usually what happens when an inmate tries to make you feel guilty is they try to get you to eliminate that middle road, because you're doing things on behalf of the agency, but they'll go ahead and try to put it back on you. And at the end of the day, your loyalty is not to the inmate. Your loyalty is to the agency. So if your job is to hold them accountable and the inmate goes to play this guilt trip, all right, but I'm more concerned about what the agency thinks or what my peers think about my actions, and not the fact that you did something and now you're going to lose out on these sanctions. My job, again, and my expectations to hold you accountable. So don't eliminate that middle road. And if you feel inmates are pushing guilt, remember who you work for and what they expect of you. That, to me, is the best defense. Remember that. Who do you work for and what do they expect from you? And the moment you think you work directly for that inmate is the moment you're in a position to get yourself caught up. Remember that. And that's also another sign we just developed just now, is when you believe that you work directly for the inmate without any influence from the agency or your peers. I think that's very powerful information. Remember that, guys, because that's going to save your career. Trust me, what I just said, that's going to save your career. It's going to keep you within your prescribed roles. I got to let Russ take the lead on this because this truly is the definition of complacency. I have seen this a lot during active movements or even just in general interactions with an inmate, but hands in pocket when interacting with the inmate. Russ, complacency 101?
Yeah, this is one of those things that even though it's tactical, I think that considering the conversation that we're having right now, we should also think about this as an analogy toward our whole outlook, because this is complacency. Maybe it's not so much about our hands in our pocket when we're interacting with the inmate, which they should never be, which is part of our tactics, part of our training. But this is also points out to, is that what our mental mindset is? Do we have our mental hands in our mental pockets inside of our head? Even if we're good out here, all right, are we being complacent when dealing with this individual? And that can be everything from, physical safety. Am I ready to, take action if I need to? Or am I just letting my guard down? Am I letting this person get into my personal space, maybe not physically, but mentally? And therefore, compromising myself. And so I think that, we can look at this in those two ways. Yes, this is an actual thing, putting our hands in our pockets, but it's a symbol of something that's much worse. It's a symbol of something that's much more concerning to us in the end. You're on mute.
Darn it. I had to. By the way, inmates can see those symbols too. The funny thing is they're more aware of our complacency than we are. How scary is that? The moment you're not doing what you're supposed to do, the moment you're hanging out, just chatting with your hands in your pocket, everybody's watching how comfortable you are. And the only person that doesn't probably realize how comfortable they are you, the person, the officer, the person, or the staff member. So be advised, man. I like what Russ said. The more you know about, your actions or your mental mindset, the better you are prepared. I would go so far as asking myself the right questions to make sure my mental mindset is en route, is where it needs to be. And also another thing is if I ever did catch my hands in my pocket, I'm definitely going to spend a few moments, away from everybody, just talking to myself a little bit, saying what made me think I was able to do that? Because I like what Russ said. That could be the beginning of other things. So you better start looking at yourself saying, hey, if I put my hands in my pocket during this, what else have I become complacent with? Because again, that hands in the pocket means you can't really defend yourself. So you're definitely very comfortable right now. So I wonder what other habits you've committed to that you may not be aware of. So it's a great time to go back and really look at your actions. And I think that's a great sign of that. And as supervisors, if we see our staff commit to a physical behavior that could be seen as complacent, we need to remind them. That's our job, because I think that we all can fall into routine of complacency. And what we as supervisors got to do is we cannot allow that to happen. We got to maintain good momentum that keeps staff on their toes. So if we see that and we do nothing, because if I was administration, I'm walking down and I see a bunch of staff members with their hands in their pocket, the first thing I go to is the highest supervisor in that area, because that's their job. Because I believe that that's something that you have to maintain, because people will always fall back into convenience and complacency. So what do you do as a supervisor? You keep the engines running where you need it to be. So again, if I'm walking in, I see everybody with their hands in their pocket, I go right to the sergeant. Hey, what's going on? And next thing you know, most likely, I'll tell you this, if all the staff have their hands in their pocket, I'll guarantee you the supervisors do as well. I'll guarantee it. So again, I thought that was definitely something that's worthy of covering. This is a good one. You have accepted an offer of protection from the inmate. Russ, Russ, I've covered this on separate shows before where people actually believe that it's okay for this to happen. I've had female officers even tell me, oh, when I run a unit, no worries. Some of the inmates, they got my back. They watch out for me and they make sure that I'm not being disrespected. And it's like, ooh, I was like, I don't like that approach whatsoever, because to me, that shows that you're more dependent on the inmate population than you are on your peers. So where's your confidence coming when you're caught in a role of ambiguity, when you don't know what to do? Where are you looking at? Are you looking at your peers or are you looking at the inmates? Russ, what's your thoughts on you've accepted an offer of protection from the inmate? Does that happen, especially around people that are nervous?
If you think that that individual actually is protecting you, maybe they even are. How do you write that individual up? How do you bring the fire to them when it's time to search their property? How do you, function in the presence of that person who is more of a peer now than they are of someone that you are over and assigned to be custody over? This is that situation where somebody there is getting tricked into this huge role reversal or role exchange where everything has gone topsy-turvy. An individual that's engaging in that can be really easily manipulated, especially at some point, whether it's staged or not, where they do provide that. Someone disrespects this individual over here, and then, that inmate goes over there and corrects that. I mean, come on, man. There is no place that I know of that I've worked where that would be a real thing. That is staging. That is a setup. That is a way to get inside someone's head. Because inmates, ultimately, if they're playing the politics the way they're supposed to at most places, is they're not taking sides of anything that the officers have to say. So just, you should understand that this one of all the ones that we go over here is probably the one that really truly shouts out, you're on the verge of being compromised. And not just compromised from being manipulated, but compromised in a way that you're going to be co-opted and corrupted and brought into their fold, not our fold.
Well, you know what, Russ? I want to partner. One of the tips are the signs that you just mentioned. So again, kind of in partnership, I'm going to also mention what you touched on. Would you feel obligated towards them? And this is that pro quo. I mean, think about this. The feeling of protection by an inmate, it kind of goes into a more of a higher generalized concern of what are you doing for me and what can I do for you? You remember, if they're offering you something, we're going to feel obligated to return that favor. It's that exchange. It's that quid pro quo. And like Russ said, if the inmate protected me, I'm going to feel obligated to them to the point where I'm not going to be objective and fair with them. I mean, I've seen it where there were situations that occurred and an inmate did protect the officer. And what the agency does is they separate the officer and the inmate, or the officer and the staff member, from dealing with each other, or they try some way to kind of pay out what that obligation would be, whether it's giving the inmate some credit, whatever, jail time credit, or giving the inmate some money for their commissary, whatever it is. They want to end that feeling of obligation so the officer or staff member can continue to deal with that inmate objectively. I would go as far as probably not having those two interact anymore, because that's a hell of an obligation. You got to realize something too, when it comes to protection, that's a hell of an obligation. That means I'm giving you my life. You understand that? If I'm giving you my life, that's also blindly putting my family's trust in you as well. Do I want to do that? Or would I rather give my trust over to my peers, to the agency that's meant to protect me? I know for a fact, back in the day, if someone saved your life, you owed them a life debt of servitude. So think about that offer of protection and what it's saying. I'm going to protect you, and in return, you owe me a life debt. No, not going to happen. If anybody, I'm sworn to protect and serve are the people I'm next to and the public that trusts me. There's no way I'm going to give that over to someone, because, again, guys, I just want to make sure one more thing. When that feeling of obligation, I want people to know that's a shift of power too. Obligations is a power dynamic. The person who is obligated to someone else is the one that's in an inferior position. So remember that. And that's why, again, when it comes to the word obligated, protection, the word favor, be careful of anything that leads to something that says, I owe you back. I give an inmate a job and they say, well, I'll do it for you this way, but not for everyone else. No, you can do it because I told you to do it. I'm not special. You're not special. And if you don't do it the way I told you to do it, I'll get somebody else to do it. Make sure that you don't put yourself in a position where the inmate is able to make this as a favor or a one-time thing where now you feel that you have to return it back? What's your thoughts on that, Russ? Kind of complement what we discussed about protection when it comes to feeling obligated towards an inmate.
Yeah, this is one of those things that crops up time and time again, where we do talk about that quid pro quo. What does make people feel obligated in certain circumstances? So, all I can tell you about that is really, if you've got, like, say, a clerk, and they do a great job for you every day, is it natural to feel some sort of obligation toward them? Yeah, that is the nature of everything that humans do toward and with each other. Everything, in a way. I know people don't like to hear this, but everything is transactional. So, it's up to you to keep that feeling and that viewpoint in check, and do the things that you should for that inmate, recognizing them, making sure that they get to commissary or whatever it is, but nothing above and beyond and outside the scope of what a professional relationship with that individual would be.
Yeah, I think in short, when you deal with that obligation dynamic, it's basically saying, who do you work for? Like, I would go to some extent, I'm obligated to the agency, right? They pay me, they give me my benefits. I have to give them my 110% effort. I'm obligated to my peers because they're obligated to me. So I don't mind saying I serve my peers. I don't mind saying I serve the agency. I have problems with saying I serve the inmate. I have a problem saying that because I have a middle road again, right? I serve the agency who serves the inmate. So therefore, there's rules there that I must follow in my obligation to the agency and in my obligation to my peers. And hopefully the agency, as we evolve, they consider the peers. We're not making this obligation directly to the inmates without filtering to the needs of staff. Now, this is unique. This next one. This is definitely a very overt sign that your peers are going to see right off the bat, but it's hard for me to believe that you're not seeing this and that you go out of your way to see the inmate when you're at work. So, Russ, that happens. What's your thoughts on this, Russ? These have been people that actually will do overtime and specifically want to work in the same unit as that inmate. So this is more about a pattern of behavior. So here's the funny thing real quick before we get in this. The funny thing about this, when it comes to manipulation, is that it may take your coworkers a second to see it because we're developing a pattern to be recognized, but you know it because you feel it. So the first time you know that you want to see this inmate or work overtime to be with this inmate, you recognize it before we ever could. What we're going to recognize is the pattern. Like, wow, that's 4 days in a row that this person wants to work that specific unit. And supervisors be on top of this as well. Because again, this for us is going to be later in the game because we're recognizing the pattern of this this dynamic, this relationship. But if you yourself, you as a staff member know you're too involved, this is something that you're going to realize first before anybody else will. What's your thoughts on that, Russ? Because there's a lot. This is important because this happens.
Yeah, this is where that boundary between being cordial and friendly breaks down into going and being friends with an individual. And sometimes in some of the things that I've worked around, I've seen that developed much further. I've actually seen where our ISU unit was conducting an investigation. And they specifically told this one officer, hey, do not go around this individual. This individual is actually housed in SEG pending the outcome of the investigation. And this person went ahead and went over there to their door and was visiting on it. And that was like the final big tip off in the investigation when we released the guy. And he was, waiting for his ride to come pick him up down at the bus station in town. And I'll just let you guess who actually went and picked him up. And so these are the things that, are really the indicators that we're going just beyond manipulation, going just beyond undue familiarity. This is where we're getting into the realm of corruption, actually. And so, an inmate that has your attention in that manner can absolutely co-opt and corrupt you as an officer.
Yeah, and a big part of that, guys, is exactly what Russ is saying. Is goes all the way back to the beginning, oversharing your personal information and allowing the inmate to pull you out of your prescribed role. Because if you're not sharing personal information, there's no way that they could develop a deep connection like this. So again, if these are feelings now that are being expressed. If I can't wait to see this inmate at the work when I go in, or here's another part, kind of relates to it. The next part is you think about the inmate when you're at home. This is because you're developing feelings. And these feelings are being developed because you're allowing the inmate to get that close to you. So now they're in control because you're not seeing the inmate as an inmate. You know, you're seeing them through the lens of this personal connection that you have. So again, you know, if you go all the way back to the first thing we said, oversharing of personal information, this is what happens when we allow that boundary to kind of be fluid, you know, back and forth. It's not. It's, you know, when you ask me something personal, what do you need to know it for? Honestly, because now if I find myself thinking about the inmate at home, because now it's getting into my home life, if I find myself can't wait to go to work to see this inmate, no matter what the reasons may be, I just can't wait to see the inmate. Who's in control? I mean, and the funny thing is they're not even in control of my position. They're in control of my life because I'm thinking about this inmate at home now. So now listen, there's the thing where, okay, I don't want the inmate to control my position. I get it. But once they start getting into your head, like the case in Alabama, this goes way beyond your prescribed role. This is now when you're at home and you could be spending time with your freaking family and you're more worried about the inmate. You know, so again, guys, you know, once they get past that personal line, it could open up to stuff like this where you want to see that inmate or you're thinking about that inmate at home, and now major conflict here. But again, because a lot of this is happening inside your head, you need to figure this out for yourself, because when we figure it out and try to help you, it's probably going to be too late because now the behavior is overt. So when we figure it out, it's because we've seen something that shouldn't have been done. And then we're going to go back and say, whoa, should have asked yourself the right questions when this was happening, because can't see what's going on in here. I can only see basically when you put your hands in your pocket. And at that point, it's up to us to address it. But it may not be the way you want it to be. And that's the scary thing too, guys, because once we let it get too far, and if it's going on in our head and we don't do anything to address it, and once we let it get too far, now it becomes obvious, there's really no turning back, even for your peers. Because sometimes your peers may be afraid to go because they feel it's a feeling. But once they're able to see it, it may be too late for them to come up with a resolution that you're going to agree with. So now what happens is we start to hide it. So here's what you got to do. You really got to check yourself first. That's your job. Check yourself first. Oh, my daughter came and brought me down to water. Hold on. Say hi.
Daddy, I got a loose tooth.
Oh, she's got a loose tooth. By the way, this is probably the only thing that's allowed to manipulate. Right there. Look at that face. All right, good. Thanks for the water. Love you. Mwah. Yeah. Okay, let me know when it does. Why is that a secret? She has a loose tooth right now, and it's going to come out. Hey, Russ, it's okay to be manipulated by your kids, though.
I'd say that you're heartless if they can't get over on you every once in a while.
Yeah. Plus, she got me a water. You know what I mean? So that was pretty cool. That means my wife is not giving me water anymore. Can't manipulate the wife. All right, so the next part. Now, Russ, this may be my biggest frustration right here. This, and I know this happens. I truly know this happens when you give the inmate information they should not have. Russ, start with that one, Russ. The biggest frustration right here.
Okay, this is where you've gone from acting as an agent of your facility and of your department to acting as an agent for this inmate and potentially for the STG that he probably belongs to. And so when we're talking about gangs, let me tell you that they're looking for every possible thing that they can to stay up on what it is they're doing. What is it that you think that they're doing? Because I know what they're doing out there, right? They're trying to establish power. They're trying to establish, conduits of finance for themselves by dealing in drugs, by dealing in cell phones, by dealing in, whatever it is that's, possibly legal or illegal out there. And so you're just a cog in the wheel to them. And if you give up some game, hey guys, make sure that, you straighten up and get everything right about this area, because we're going to do a search later. Well, you know what? You just really impinged on the safety and security of the institution. What's going to happen with you say, hey, you know what? Later today, we're going to go into lockdown mode because we're going to, be a little short staffed. And then, what do the inmates do with that information? Well, maybe they say, hey, you know what? This is a good time right before they lock us up that we're going to finally, get off and do this riot thing that's been a coming. You probably aren't able to see all the little pieces that are in motion with things like this, and giving up game, giving up information that they shouldn't have, that they don't have any right to, is just a way for you to accidentally potentially cause a critical incident. And then, at best, maybe they're able to get over and keep some of their hard-earned contraband that they have. So don't go thinking that any little thing is just, a throwaway thing. And guess what? We are gonna, pay off our quid pro quo. We are gonna, go ahead, and now we're even with this inmate, because there's no way to ever get even.
Yeah, you see what we just did there, what Russ just did? So these signs are definitely good to know in an isolated fashion, yes, but they don't work in an isolated fashion. They work in conjunction with each other. Remember, just again, quickly, I give up my personal information. Again, most likely, if I'm not protecting my personal information, why would I protect the integrity of operations? So now I get this inmate who offers to protect me. Now I feel I got to protect them. So because I feel obligated to them. So next thing I know, how do I protect them? Hey, Russ, if you got anything you shouldn't have in your stuff, I would take care of that right now, because in about 10 minutes, we're going to come and do a search. Look how this all plays out. They're all connected. I mean, we could go back one day and just do probably one story breaking down all 18 tips, defining one incident to some extent, if you look back far enough. But having said that, guys, again, it's great to recognize these signs, because if you miss the first step, maybe you'll see the second, the third, the fourth, the fifth. But man, if you can't see it past a certain amount, that's on you. Because I'm going to tell you something. The more involved this game gets, the more overt your behavior is. So if you're not seeing it, we are. And then I'm going to push it on your peers. You're telling me you couldn't see this when this person was 18 steps in? There's not one behavior, not one shift in their dynamic that you couldn't catch that was overt. Again, because some of these behaviors, yes, they could be here, but eventually what's going to happen, it's got to manifest out into their behaviors and actions. And that's when we, as their peers, we should know that and recognize these things. So again, I find it very hard that we're not seeing these things as the game progresses. Maybe when it's subtle, I get it, but the game itself is not a subtle play. It may start off that way, but man, does it push into the overt. And if we're not sensing that at any level, I blame everyone. I blame everyone, because the behaviors are so overt that when you look back, it's like, man, how did I miss that? Exactly. How did you miss it? Honestly, how did you miss it? Maybe it's better just to say you didn't want to do nothing about it, because you're either going to be dumb because you didn't see the obvious, you didn't care enough to do anything about it. That's the biggest concern. Or you're just lazy. You just don't care enough for anything to even make the attempt to fix this behavior. Okay, so it's great that you brought that up, Russ, because it all does connect. So that was I like we brought down the breakdown for like a search, or that the search is coming, because I believe that happens a lot. I believe there are staff that may, in an effort for that obligation, that pro quo, or that rapport they're building, which we'll get to later on, is I'm going to go ahead and tell that inmate that a search is coming, because let me protect them. Because here's another thing. Because if I don't tell them, they're going to get mad at me. Because they're going to come to me and they're going to think, well, you could have told me. Look at all the stuff I've done for you. You knew the search was coming and you didn't tell me. And that crosses into and we'll get to the what we did already, actually, the feeling of guilt. The inmate may come up to you and say, hey, you didn't You didn't tell me they were doing a search today after all the stuff I'd done for you. And then you're actually in your mind thinking like, oh shit, that's right. I should have helped him today. It all plays out, guys. This is a big thing for me. I'm sorry. I don't know if this is a personal thing, but you allow the inmates to call you by your first name. It just removes the title. It removes your professional responsibility if they're not calling you. I'll even accept Mr., but you're calling me Russ or you're calling me Anthony. I think there's a boundary there. I'm not saying that we can't utilize their first names as a tool, because it could be a great tool if it's not used all the time, because it's a great way to break bread in order to achieve an objective. There's always an objective behind it, but it's not something I would do every day, because then you lose the effect of the power of that tool. But I don't see myself in a position where I'm going to need an inmate to do that to me, because I would assume the position of the first name. Because remember, guys, titles up matter. Like, it's okay for me not that it's always okay, but like if I'm talking to my superior, my inferiors, which I don't want to say inferiors, that's horrible to say that. If I'm talking to the people I supervise, I may call them by their first name to build some build a connection. They may still recognize the title. I get it. But if I had an inmate doing that to me, I think that's backwards. I think that you need to respect the title of the people that are above you. It's respect. It is what it is. You don't remove the title at all. And I think it opens up an unprofessional connection between you and that inmate. So I've walked around units, especially with the officers that were more senior. So like maybe an earlier shift, where you actually see that dynamic all day. Officers and inmates dropping each other's first name all day. And it's like, hey, guys, really? I mean, I have not once seen anything that expresses the relationship of our professional connection. What's your thoughts on that, Russ, when you allow inmates just casually call you out by your first name? Because this does happen.
Yeah, this is one of those things where it's, there should be, in my opinion, just like yours, an element of formalism, toward, that relationship. And that formalism consists of, using the title, hopefully, but if not that, something that is a more formal expression. And last names tend to be it. We wear that last name on there. I know that some places require the first name too, which is just insane to me. But we have that last name on there. And if they want to call me by my last name, I'm good with that. If they want to call me Sergeant, I'm good with that. If they want to call me Sergeant Hamilton, I'm good with that too. But there are these boundaries, there are these edges, there are these borders that we want to keep the bounds of this relationship within, right? And so one way of doing that is to use formal things, formal labels. Whether we want to call them, hey, Inmate Smith. I know now the whole big deal is calling them resident or Mr. or that kind of thing, and that's all fine. But what it does do is it tends to erode those labels in our mind, and that way that we have of viewing what our prescribed role is to a degree. So I think that anything that we can do to bolster that on our side, because now that's being taken away, is do insist, call me Sergeant or call me Hamilton or call me Sergeant Hamilton. But to try and introduce some more of that formality, I think is always a good thing. I know that there's people that have a completely diametrically opposed view on this, which tends to be in some of the smaller facilities where these people, they know each other on the inside, they know each other on the outside. I still think it's helpful to draw those lines and not have them so blurry, have some black, have some white, and no gray in between, especially in those circumstances where you do know them on the outside, because then there's less likely to be a misunderstanding about what the nature of our relationship is inside those walls.
Yeah, and guys, by the way, the first name could be the result of the communication of the personal information that allowed for that to happen, or it could actually be the initial attempt to get the personal information. I'm also not a big fan of calling inmates by their nicknames, because you don't know how they've earned those nicknames. outside the fact that it does cross into some level of Ondu, or it could be like, yo, what's up, CK? What's up, CK? It's like, yo, you think that means Crip killer, but he's a cop killer. So you're just yelling cop killer on the whole unit thinking it's cool shit. Just stop. They have their name, call their name, and that's it. Mr. whatever it is, whatever you want to do. Just to keep that professional boundary. And again, when you're in a higher position, as I was trying to express before, the first name could be a tool for you to utilize. Again, but you can't utilize it all the time. You just, it's when it's needed to be. Like if the inmate's going through some level of crisis, that report can now have an effect. Again, I got my first name here. I'm going to go ahead and utilize it. I got the inmate's first name. I'm going to utilize it to, hey, Jim, everything good? What's going on? Why are you going through this? It isn't usually you. But then when the crisis is averted and everything goes back to normal, goes right back to Mr. Smith. Again, but I don't see a reason, because I see that as a power dynamic. I don't see that as a reason to go up. Like, I don't see that we as an officer or staff member go in crisis, an inmate comes up to you and says, yo, Russ, you having a bad day? What's going on? How can I help you? Nah. If anything, my supervisor or my peers will break me away from whatever's happening today and then talk to me on that very intimate level. And by the way, one more thing, it does become an intimate level in our profession only because the profession defines these roles in which those titles need to be utilized. So when the first name is utilized, it is a rare occasion, which makes it more intimate because the person utilizing that first name may have a connection outside of that professional role. So if that explains why I want to protect that, it's because in a role that's defined by that hierarchy and that organizational structure, you're breaking away from it when you go right to that informal name, whatever it is. You know what I'm talking about, right? The informality of just using the first name, especially in such a heightened culture as corrections, with that hierarchy there for a reason, because that hierarchy, and not that we're positional people, but for the inmates, sometimes our position is what helps us at first get that level of authority that we need to be effective. But having said that, if you're letting people go around the position and not see you in that position, and more so see you as Rush, gotta be careful, man. I mean, we're not talking about, us as a supervisor to our peers. We're talking about our relationship to the inmate population. And that's a totally different dynamic than a supervisor with his officers. So don't ever compare the two either. It's a totally different dynamic. That makes sense for us real quick? That made sense, right?
Absolutely. Absolutely.
All right. So I got the next one. And this happens a lot, guys, by the way, is that you justify your relationship with the inmate by saying that this inmate is different. Go ahead, Russ, because I see you ready for this one.
Okay, so different how? All right, different in that, in your estimation, this inmate is on the up and up, that this inmate has changed his life, that this inmate has paid his price to society, that he's learned his lesson, that he's never going to make a mistake again. Man, I hate to break it to you, but, there's a lot of recidivism, and, just because this individual seems like they are, that person, that inmate that's different from all the rest, doesn't mean that they're either going to be able to maintain that, or that this isn't necessarily a put on. This might be the type of thing that they put on to everybody out there. How many times do you think that this inmate has approached his family and said, I swear, baby, this time it's going to be different. I'm going to get a job at Costco. I'm never going to, touch methamphetamine again. And, we're going to get married. I mean, in essence, a lot of these people are con men. And so you don't have any special insight, generally, I would say, other than what your interaction is with them. You probably don't have time to go break down everybody's central file and see. And even then, that information may not be there. That's why you need to treat inmates in an established way that levels them all out so that you don't start picking favorites. You start picking favorites and they can manipulate you. You start picking favorites and you might put that inmate in significant danger. But it might be the opposite. He might be, at the top of the food chain already and part of the STG establishment, and that everyone already knows that he's using you in some fashion. Maybe it's not even been determined yet. So, if you think that you're that much on top of the game, you better check yourself, because you probably aren't. I've seen this time and time again where people establish these relationships with an inmate on the friend level, and really all the time they're being played. So I think that people have an overblown view of what their ability is to determine what an inmate's really all about.
Yeah, and it's funny, guys, when we in our mind think that this inmate's somewhat different than the rest, instead of us putting up this white flag of submission, we should be putting up a red flag of caution. I like what Russ said, why is this inmate different than everyone else? Why am I not putting up the red flag to kind of figure out what the inmate's end game is, as opposed to doing the opposite and saying, oh, well, this inmate's not like everybody else, so here's my white flag, and I surrender to that. No, you can't. I think the moment you're able to separate something unique, maybe is the moment where you should start to think like, hey, something may not be right here. So let me just put a caution on this one, because this inmate's definitely getting too close. And Russ, you said something that crosses into the next one, so I might as well just put them both together. Is this is the one that you actually would probably do a whole show on, and I think we've had. But you rationalize your relationship with the inmate by saying you're just building a rapport. Now, I love, Russ has done a discussion on this in the past, and it's spot on, because we realized in the past that some officers or staff member have justified their known foolery, because they know they're doing it, by the way, but they justify it by they're just rapport building. But at the end of the day, rapport building is not the end effect. I'm not building a rapport for the sake of rapport. Even when I mentioned the incident before, the rapport building I mentioned was eventually used to help this inmate deal with the crisis. So again, we built a rapport. I go up there. Now I'm utilizing it as an end result. So there's always an end result in the building of rapport. It's not constant, and that's the end result. If I went to an officer and said, why you look a little too close to that inmate, what are you doing? Well, I'm rapport building. Really? They give you information? Because I don't seem to know anything of anything that's with you and this inmate. So if you're rapport building and that's your sole thing, that's your means to an end, and I'm just going to keep building rapports, you will open the door to be being manipulated. Correct, Russ? I mean, these are lessons Russ 101 right here.
Yeah, there's a lot to it, and a lot of ways to break this whole thing down. Just to give you an idea, one day was out there on my yard, and one of my officers, he says, "What are we doing today, Sarge?" And I said, "You know what? We're doing the same thing we do every day. We are going to fight evil, suppress tyranny, and strike fear and terror into the hearts of evildoers all over this yard." And he turned to this other officer, and I think he kind of set this guy up. He said, "And what are you doing today?" He says, "I'm going to be out there building rapport." And I was like, what the hell? What the hell does that mean? I mean, I understand a need for communication. Rapport, though, is something else, because it's really kind of intangible. And, the types of people that most inmates are, they're only in it for the rapport until they get something that's more along the lines of a quid pro quo. So what is it that an officer is out there and he's ostensibly building rapport actually doing? What he's actually doing is he's trying to be popular. He wants the inmate population as a whole to view him as someone that's different. Remember how we talked about an inmate that's different? Well, now we've got an officer who's ostensibly different. This guy, he's fair, he's balanced, he's unbiased, and you know what? He's the one that's going to get us what we need at our moment of need. And so when you look at that and you just kind of, well, this officer then is obviously probably unable to say no. He's probably, has within himself the idea that, you know what, if I can establish some of these relationships, maybe if something goes horribly bad out there, I'll be okay, which is a complete fallacy, right? Inmates, by and large, they don't necessarily operate on the same principles that we do. None of their victims just didn't show quite enough, love toward them, if you will, respect, if you will. It's not that at all. They are by and large predators. That doesn't mean that they can't change. That doesn't mean that they're not going to be able to make it out of the prison system and having done some good work. But we're not necessarily the ones that can be in there doing that hard work to try and change them. Can we do pro-social things? Yes. But being a different kind of officer, the one that gets all of the respect, the one that gets all of the popularity contests won, that's not what we're about. And people that have that mindset, that view rapport in that way, when it evaporates so easily, they can be taken advantage of.
Yeah, and that kind of crosses into, again, just kind of see where they connect. You look for their approval to do your job. You know, a lot of officers or a lot of staff may look to try to be popular, which makes them hesitant because, you know, if I look to be popular amongst the inmate, like Russ said, building the rapport, whatever it is, and they don't like something I have to do, then I kind of may become hesitant in doing it to them because, again, I'm more concerned about being popular with them or being liked by them than I am about actually doing my job. And that's why it is very concerning when if you're making the effort to build this rapport and that's the end game, well, then you're going to leave yourself in a position to look for their approval to do your job, to be effective, because at the end, building a rapport can mean you're just looking to be liked. You know, again, what's the end game? What are you building the rapport for? What is it that you're trying to accomplish? You know, because at the end, you haven't showed me anything that I can have in my hands. You know, Russ was right. Rapport is intangible. I don't know what that means until you're able to produce something from it. You know, so again, I got an inmate in crisis. We have this respect that I built, and now I'm able to utilize it. Okay, now I can see the results. I can see there's something there. Or I'm able to get information, you know, based on respect, not based on the quick. There's a difference there, guys. There's a difference of gaining information because you're respected, which again still has to be filtered. I'm not saying we take any information blindly, but there's also a difference of getting information because I do for you, you do for me. A lot of investigators do it that way. Oh, I got to give this inmate something because they gave me information. Guys, we'll be doing that all day and they'll be making up information. It's got to be filtered, and real good information comes from the fact that, man, I respect Russ, and this inmate really does give the information because they like how Russ rolls. They like Russ's professionalism. And at the end of the day, sure, Russ is still weary of the information that's coming. You know, I get it. But, you know, again, if it's filtered out properly, good information is good information. It could be developed from a good level of respect as long as it's not blindly taken. But having said that, if you're more focused on the rapport and there's nothing coming at the end result, the rapport will define your dynamic and every interaction with that inmate or the inmates. And now that need to be liked, that need to be popular. Every time you go to issue something, it's going to be like, ooh. I mean, there's a good question right there. Oh, the sergeant needs me to do this directive, man, but if I do that, how's that going to affect inmate Smith? Who cares? Do your job. It's what's expected. You're not looking for the inmate's approval. You're looking just to do your job. So I think that kind of connected to each other. Russ, would you agree?
Yeah, absolutely. You know, we have to be able to function in the capacity of a correctional officer, as a correctional sergeant, lieutenant, whatever. And when you're taken outside of that capacity and you're trying to function as someone's friend, as an acquaintance, as someone that they just know is good old Russ, then you've really, you know, dissolved the power and the persuasion of your title over that individual. You know, all of these things that happen day in and day out, I don't go in there with some preset idea about, you know, hey, I want to use force today, but it may become necessary. And if I'm stifling myself and making myself hesitant, I can get myself hurt. I want to be in there functioning one and only as a correctional professional and not as someone who's out there trying to, you know, do good or trying to be somebody's friend or trying to, you know, just get through my day by being friendly and trying to pay off some sort of, you know, intangible debt by being, you know, obsequious in some way to these guys and not being in their business. You know, one of the things that inmates do not like is when you are in their business and you know what they're doing and you know that they're out there getting dope and cell phones and sharpening weapons and doing all manner of evil, and you're disrupting that, you're not going to be their friend. And so just the idea, well, we can just get along and we can have some kind of détente that's fashioned on, you know what, never rocking the boat. That's just really infantile to try and be thinking at that level. We want to be proactive, and we want to be out there stopping things before they happen. Because if we're just reacting to everything, oops, the boat is getting ready to tip over, and it tips over, and we could have stopped it. We could have changed the ballast in there. We could have, rigged the sails different. And we didn't do that. Why? Because we didn't want to upset the inmate population. You know what? There's a lot to this. This is a thinking man's game. And that's just a little inside baseball there.
No, it's 100% correct. Again, like what you said, it goes back to who we working for. I mean, honestly, who we working for. You trust them more than your peers and coworkers. Remember before we touched on the offer to protection. What does that say? It says that I put more trust in the inmate population as I do my coworkers. And guys, this is a big thing too, because when inmates try to isolate you, part of their game is going to be divide and conquer, which means that my job is, if I see that, if I'm an inmate and I see that if I see that Gangi and Russ are tight, I want to get in between that, because there's no way I can isolate Gangi or Russ unless we get in between that. So when they're able to break us up and then further us apart by, making us enemies as opposed to us being peers, the problem is when we're stuck in ambiguous situations, which we all go through, especially rookies, because rookies probably are going to be prone to inmates playing this game, because rookies are trying to develop trust. So at this time, the inmates are going to say, well, we want to get on that first. A lot of times inmates will badmouth peers, officers' peers and stuff like that to the rookie officers, because the officer's still making that initial impression. So with that said, it's like a race on who they can trust first, the fastest. And if inmates are more immediate to them and we're not, filling up that unit every once in a while with good peers, good staff, and good supervisors, the problem is there's a chance for the rookie now to start connecting to the inmate population, because the inmates are more immediate to the rookie, as opposed to us, who should be walking in, checking in, and letting that rookie know that we got your back. It's empowering, but also, hey, I won't let you drown either. That's why sink or swim, all that other shit, that doesn't work, because when the rookie's developing that initial relationship, those that are closest to them are the ones that they're going to look to go after and trust first, because it's just human dynamic, guys. It is. So that's why we have to be aware of what the environment does and what it doesn't do. So if I have an officer that's new in an isolated position and I'm a supervisor, I'm going to visit him a little bit more often today, make sure that he knows whose side he's on or she knows whose side he's on. If I got some staff that have some free time, hey, do me a favor, go check out this unit, again, because is a rookie officer, because again, we haven't established a rapport with this person yet. So we want to make sure that we connect with the person, and then eventually the profession is secondary, if that makes any sense. Connect with me first, Anthony to Russ. Let me and Russ build a bond, and then the profession comes secondary, because I want my bond between me and Russ to be paramount, so it's harder to break. And then the thing here is, I will tell you one thing. Again, if we allow that to happen, and the rookie, because this is more for rookies, because I would assume senior staff should have that bond, or they should know where that bond needs to be. But for rookies, when you go through something that's ambiguous, you better always look who you're looking for the answer. I used to hate it when senior officers were so lazy that they would tell rookies, if you have any question, this inmate runs the unit. What are you doing? You're going to put this initial sense to build trust. When this officer needs help, you just gave that level of trust over to an inmate. That puts the whole obligation into effect. That puts everything that we're trying to go against into effect by your simple, lazy action to push whatever that officer needs to the most senior inmate on the unit. This officer right now needs that, but they also need to build trust. You just gave that initial trust, that initial trust to the fucking inmate. Like, are you kidding me? That lazy attempt now can literally bias that officer's initial impression to wind up going to the inmate for things they shouldn't go to the inmate to. And here's the funny thing, guys. It's not so much about the officer not knowing what to do, or the staff member, but not knowing what they should go to the inmate about. That's even deeper. So now all of a sudden, I've never seen where if I had a staff member that needed something and they were directed to go to the inmate first, I never saw an inmate that said, well, that's not really for me to answer. You should go to your... No, they're going to answer whatever they can. So again, not only are you telling the officer or the staff member, hey, if you need help, go to the inmate, don't go to me, bullshit, but you're also not even, what should they go to the inmate for? Foolish, guys, foolish, because there's a lot of things there that inmate doesn't need to know about, and then you just burned that initial trust. What's your thoughts on all that, Russ, with that trusting your more in your peers? You trust them more than you trust the inmates more than your peers or coworkers. I mean, that could be done not just through you, but also the environment. What I just mentioned could push you towards that. Correct?
Yeah, in this particular one, if you want to identify the staff members that have fallen down this hole and they've fallen into the whole thing about, trusting an inmate more than my peers, just identify those individuals who are being shopped for by the inmates. When an inmate needs something, who is it that they're going to approach? Are they going to approach me first? Probably not. Who is it that they are approaching first? They are approaching these people that have decided for one reason or another that they align and identify more closely to the inmate type of mentality than they do to the professional mentality of the other officers and the other sergeants and so forth that are running that unit. So just look for that. Look for who the inmates shop for when they need a cheap, easy, fast answer to something.
Yeah, that's powerful. I like that. Maybe when I update my inmate manipulation book in a few years, I'm going to add a lot of that to that. Guys, hopefully you make it this far into the dialogue, because as we went through it, the dialogue really developed a lot better. That's how these dialogues work. They start great, but they get even better. This is a quick one, quick no-no here. I've seen staff get caught up in the inmate gossip with inmates about other staff. Inmates will take an opportunity to build a divide and conquer, and they will negatively talk about your peers. And then there are some staff that engage in that, and you're a fool. You're a fool. If you allow the inmate to sit there and talk negative about your peers, and then you're sitting there engaged in it instead of correcting the dialogue before it even could actually happen. The problem is, I'm going to tell you something right now. You may think they're giving up the information, but you are. Because what they're going to wind up doing, guys, is they're going to wind up utilizing all that, and eventually you're going to have a divide amongst staff, because I'll guarantee you may think that they're the only one you're talking to about this, but they're not. They're playing that game all across the compound, and the next thing you know, we have staff who, instead of, this inmate was talking about me and Russ today, I'm going to go to Russ and let Russ know. They don't. Staff won't go to, and now we have everybody isolated on the assumption that we all hate each other, and the inmates love it. The inmates love it because not one of us had the courage to go and say, I'm going to put a stop to this right now. Hey, Russ, can you come to my unit real quick? You got to hear what this inmate's saying right now. Boom. And we're going to nip it right in the bud. But the last thing I will let happen is for that dialogue to cause a divide, because at the end of the day, if Russ likes me or not, it doesn't matter. We're still going to be professional with each other. And what these inmates are trying to do is they're trying to bring emotion into it. So now we're not communicating. And who wins when we don't communicate? The inmates do, because I've had it where officers don't get along, and when they go to implement a sanction, instead of me telling Russ, because I don't like Russ to help me carry it out, because maybe it's going to switch into another shift, I'll just wait. And I'll just wait because I don't trust Russ could do his job. And the inmates love that because they could see that we're not connected. Or another thing is, hey, Gange, can I tell you something in confidence? And that's a test. That's a test, because they're going to tell you something that's actionable, and they're going to tell by your action if you went and did what needed to be done, which is most likely communicate. And if you don't communicate and there's no action, they know that you're not as connected to your peers. Everything's a test. But again, they're trying to see how much you trust your coworkers. And part of that test is, I'm going to go ahead and badmouth Russ to Gangi and see what Gangi does. And I'm going to tell you something. I would go as far as not even just cutting off the dialogue, but I would go as far as bringing that officer to the unit and letting the inmates see that what that inmate just told you was not in secret. Because now I just called my boy over here, and right in front of that inmate, I'm telling you exactly what they said. And if that other officer is compromised, we're going to discover that too. So either way, your job is to reinforce whenever you can your connection with your peers. Would you agree with that, Russ? Have you ever seen inmates try to divide like that, to try to see what action you commit to and they start bad-mouthing somebody, I literally called the officer right down the unit that they were talking about and said, yo, this is what this inmate said about you.
Well, yeah, communication is always a two-way street. And so, the things that the inmates bring up because they're trying to staff split, they're trying to, play off against each other, and they're trying to, diminish the efficacy of what we do in that unit on a day-to-day basis. But also the reverse is true. You see officers that are, volunteering information about people to the inmates. And what's that really all about? I mean, you got to look back to it. We talked earlier in the thing about giving information out that inmates shouldn't have. Should you be telling an inmate, hey, what's his name? Officer Smith, he just got popped for drunk driving, or, he's having problems at home, or, he has a domestic violence, or he's not doing his job anymore. Whatever it is, I mean, those are things that we keep to ourselves. We should be very careful about who we talk to anyone about, let alone running our mouth to the inmates. When you're putting yourself in that position and you feel comfortable enough to do that, you've got a much bigger problem, probably right there, potentially on the horizon. But it's time to, completely rework and think through what it is you do on a day-to-day basis with regards to all of your relationships, maybe even your relationships at home, because something is not quite right.
Yeah, guys, real quick, this one I believe we touched on already. You feel responsible for their negative behavior. Again, that comes with the feelings of guilt. We talked about that earlier. But if an inmate is doing something foolish, sometimes you find that with the helping roles that come into this profession, the people that are program specialists, educators, whatever it is, that when the inmate falls back, they may take it personally. Don't. They are responsible for their negative behavior, and they will try to shift guilt your way, and your job is to hold them accountable. So the more you internalize their negative behavior, you need to step back and remind yourself that you have to be held accountable, and you cannot feel guilty for their foolish behavior. Your job is to report it or do what's necessary. Because if you start feeling guilty, then you stop wanting to do your job, which is hold the inmates accountable. So don't let their external behavior turn inwards on you. All right. So that's a quick one. We kind of touched on that. So I think we're down to two. You accept personal compliments from them. What's your thoughts on that, Russ?
I mean, that's just the conduit. That's the pathway to butter you up. To what? To ask you for something. What does asking for something have to do with that? We're back to those three words again, quid pro quo, and that they are going to give you a compliment in exchange for what? In exchange for you getting them to commissary, in exchange for you giving them a break, letting them go early from their work assignment, whatever it is. And so, just understand what those things are, especially when they're of a personal nature. Oh yeah, man, you've been packing on the muscle pounds, whatever it is, you just have to be really cautious, because I've found that there's almost always something that they want. And for you to think otherwise is complacent. Gotcha again.
Damn it. By the way, guys, we just pretty much, and we have one more tip left, but we just pretty much gave you a course. I mean, this is pretty much could have been 18 things, and you could have broken it down into a course that could literally be a full day course if need be, because we would share experiences, very interactive. For the personal compliments, I just want to add that if an inmate does give it to you, don't accept it blindly. You let them know how it's inappropriate because it doesn't relate to your role. You smell nice, CO. I mean, really, why are you that close smelling me? You look nice, CO. Why are you looking at me that way? You can't allow that to happen. Some people think they can ignore it. You can't. You have to correct the behavior, because if you ignore it to the inmate, it's submissive. It means that, okay, if you ignore it, that means I can keep on doing it. They're going to keep on doing it until someone tells them they say no. And the no has to be legit. It's not because the agency tells you it's not okay. It's because it's not okay. Remember, I need to trust you when I'm not watching you. So if you keep on telling me you're only doing these right things because there's a fear that I'm going to see you, so that the agency doesn't think this is correct, that's not the right way to do it. The right way to always do it is know that it's coming from you. The reason why you're not doing it is because you yourself know it's not right. That is not what you're here for. Let the inmates know that you're not doing it because someone's watching you. You're not doing it because you know it's not the right thing to do. How you justify matters. And this is a good one to save for the last one. And this kind of comes what we talked about earlier about looking to be popular and all this other stuff, or looking to be liked and looking to build that rapport for the sake of rapport. And at that point, when all that stuff happens, no becomes harder to say to them. Would you agree to that, Russ?
Okay, so this is going out to you, Jack Mosley, because he's always the one, putting up there the old Oscar the Grouch and the big no sign. And, it sounds like a simple lesson, but, really it underlies and underpins a lot of the different things that we do inside corrections. And so, especially when you're first starting out and, you're that new boot out there on the range, out there on the yard and in the unit, no should almost be reflexive. All right. Because the chances are is you don't know the answer to the question that they're putting out there. And so, it sounds good. It sounds legit. So I'll just say yes. You're putting yourself in a position where you are going to lose out on being perceived, whether you want to call it rapport or anything else. That's not what I'm trying to get at right now, on whether or not you're a person who keeps your word, whether you're perceived as being a serious officer. It's really hard to take back that yes. As you start to establish yourself, as you start to become more knowledgeable about policy and procedure and the needs that dictate the running of the unit, then you'll be much more in a position to give out a yes, or to give out something where there's, an exchange that takes place. You know what, if such and such happens, then yes, we will be able to, extend yard or whatever it is. But until you're in a position to understand how all of those things come into play, how they interlock, how they all affect each other, reflexively on a day-to-day basis, you should be saying no.
I like what you said too, because I wrote a post a while ago on Facebook and on YouTube that said, when dealing with the inmate population, remember, saying no is more intentional than saying yes. So it's great that you want to make it reflect, like you want to make it as if it's a reactionary thing. But believe it or not, saying no is harder. And that's why you have to be intentional with it until it becomes what's the word? Reflective? It's not reflective. What's the word now? The word you were saying. Reflexive, right?
Reflective, yes.
Yeah. So I want you to know, when I posted this up on YouTube and Facebook, because they are liberal media, it's liberal media. What I put, when dealing with the inmate population, remember, saying no is more intentional than saying yes. I only got 27 million likes. I got like 10, and usually from family and friends who just scroll through it. But yeah, guys, no, if you can't say no to an inmate, you better be asking yourself why. And I'll guarantee it's because you're no longer working for the agency. I'm being honest with you. It's not. It's now because you're working directly for the inmate, or you're seeking approval because you want to be liked and build that rapport. All right, Russ, anything you'd like to say in closing, sir?
Yeah, just, I think this is a really good dialogue. I think that we covered everything from, Corrections 101 to some more advanced concepts here. Everything, though, is ultimately it's interlinked, and a lot of these things, do change or reflect well on the way that we presented them here. Like I think you said, this is an absolute great one for your IST unit. Take and show it to them. The more exposure we get out there, the more we're able to bring you videos like this. Give us the thumbs up. Give us a little comment, say something to us. We always try and comment back if we possibly can. We really try and be very interactive in all these to that degree, even though this one is recorded. So we're always there to try and help and to try and push the body of knowledge forward.
Yeah, guys, I agree with Russ. This could definitely be something that you can kind of play in the background and break down the video however you want to break it down. And you can go ahead and put your experiences in it as you teach the class. But these are pretty much, I even think we made more than 18 as we were discussing this. And there's more to come we'll think about. But this is a great foundation, because not only did we go from general knowledge, but we went to specifics. So for people that can see the value in this, this is how the game could be applied, and then what we could do to defend it. And guys, again, for people that know that some of the videos are longer, guys, just because conversation develops. You know, we can go in with 5 tips, but I don't know which way we want to go with it. So let's have fun. Let's see where it goes. And we could give everybody true education within the context of what it is that we're trying to put out there. It's not putting out tips for the sakes of tips. It's putting out tips to help them understand the context. And context takes a while to explain. Look at my shirt today. Nope, not today. So it's just weird that I was wearing that one. As always, guys, the show is Tier Talk. If you haven't, please subscribe, interact, engage, comment, hit that bell. Bell's going to notify every time I post a video. Stay safe.